On today's episode, Mike and Ryan return to Myth-Brewsters. Cheers. Hi, and welcome to another episode of the Brewthers-In-Law podcast, where beer is thicker than water. Join us on a journey discovering home brewery, craft beer, and more. My name is Ryan, and with me, as always, is Mike. How's it going, Mike?
I'm doing great.
Are you feeling behind the curtain? This is episode 2 we're recording. I can feel a little bit.
Episode 1 was a heck of an episode, so this should be interesting.
Okay, lock it in. Game face.
Let's get into it.
All right, so
Ryan, we need our science faces on today.
Science face.
Science. Hashtag science.
So as we stated, we are going back to Myth-Brewsters. And by popular demand, it was a very popular episode on our first season. So we want to come back and do a few more experiments. But before we dive into that, let's talk more myths, which seems to be a common thing in our brewery and things.
We like to use the word myth to mean all sorts of things.
Exactly. So for this one, for our first sip, I wanted to ask you, Mike, what is your favorite mythological story, or the story in general, that teaches you a valuable lesson?
Depending on how long the story is, it's just The Hobbit. But I have a more specific answer. So I tried hard, since Myth-Brewsters is really more about urban myths and the sort of like truisms, but are they really true? I tried to think of something like that taught a moral, and I felt like I should have been able to, but I couldn't.
Yeah.
So I went more to mythology, but at least I tried to go in a different direction from the sorts of, we definitely did a lot of Greek and Viking and stuff like in our Legends of Brewing episode. Mm-hmm. The first thing that popped into my head when you sent this was there's kind of two versions of this myth, but have you ever heard of like the spider's thread?
Yeah.
It was what the Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword used as the inspiration for that little part of the dungeon where you go into the underworld and you climb up on that little, and the zombies are chasing you. It's really cool. It's like it's a Japanese kind of parable about a criminal who tries to climb out of the underworld along a spider's thread. Mm-hmm. And I've never read the original version of that in Japanese or English, though I've kind of like scanned it just out of curiosity. But there is sort of an alternative version of that in the Brothers Karamazov by Dostoevsky. Okay. Which it's similar, but it's like somebody being pulled out of the underworld by an onion. And like there's a reason for that. It's like like giving an onion to some poor person or something like that. It's like basically like the one good deed that this person did in their entire life was centered around an onion. Mm-hmm. And then the whole, I don't know if it's a moral exactly, but like I believe in both cases, everybody else in the underworld, wants to get out too and is grabbing them and dragging them down. Yeah. And that is that's the first thing that popped into my head. Favorite? Maybe. I think it's really cool. And I think the kind of...
what's the lesson it's teaching though?
I think the best, I would argue that the best little teaching myths like this don't teach a super clear lesson. It's like, on the one hand, it's saying that one good deed is enough to redeem you, right? Mm-hmm. But on the other hand, then she gets dragged back down by all of these other sinners. Yeah, so there's kind of two sides to it, right? It's not immediately clear. And if you I don't know how many people in 2022 have read the Brothers Karamazov, but that book is full of things like that are sort of contradictions. It's like more he's having an argument with himself more than he's trying to I think spell out a specific truth, and I think that's cool. You could read it and get one lesson or the other. Yeah. So that's one of the things that I like about it. So I think I would say that, if I'm going to say that it's my favorite, it's because you can come back to it and it's not like, okay, I get it. Yeah. It's got some depth to it.
Yeah.
How about you?
I was going to go Greek, but like you said, I wanted to spin off a little bit. So I kind of took a tangent off it, and I'm going to dive into a little It is actually a little bit Greek, but it's also DC Comics. So in the world of DC Comics, you have a superhero called Shazam. They did do a movie recently with Zachary Levi. And Shazam has the power of the god of different Greek gods, strength of Hercules, speed of Hermes, blah blah blah, and he's always picked to be someone who follows your cardinal, like doesn't follow the cardinal sense. So you stay away from greed, you stay away from pride and everything else. And the other end of that spectrum is the Black Adam, which there is a movie coming out with The Rock, in which he has the same powers of my cat. He finds a bottle cap. Yes. But Black Adam does have the same powers of Shazam, but he went to those deadly sins and took the power for himself. It's a weird, interesting
mix that it's like Greek powers with a very Christian set of sins.
Yes.
You know?
So like you want to help others and everything else. And like when you go through a lot of the comic books of Shazam and you see Shazam is technically a kid who says the magic word Shazam and becomes the superpower being.
Didn't realize it was that simple.
Yeah, it was. I know, right?
Now you've just said.
I'm about to say I've said it like 5 times, so clearly I'm not worthy enough. Right? But he, as a kid, like he was helping out others around him. He was like doing all these things, even though it wasn't detrimental to him. He still helped others, and that's why he was able to have the powers of Shazam. So that's my thing. It's a little different, but like.
Well, I think that's good because we've semi-recently covered myths, so I think taking it, I think we both took it in an interesting direction.
Yeah,
and really, this episode is about myths in a very different sense anyway.
Exactly.
So I think we're exploring the full possibility space.
So I'm going to dive into a little bit of listener feedback. Just do a couple. So the first one, we're going to go back to season 1, episode 16, which is Beyond the Beer, mead making. So this is where I talked about making. I know we did an episode with you did a rainbow. Follow-up.
You inspired me.
Yes. So this one, it's from someone named Johnny Table, and it's literally a GIF of someone that says, "Can I drink mead now?" You can go right ahead. I am okay with
please
this.
Please do, yeah, please do. Hopefully that means that episode made him thirsty, and he immediately made a trip to his local liquor store and bought some.
So the next one I have is from Shane Kelly, a close friend of the podcast. He just sent us a picture of, and I actually got this for my new vehicle, my new lease. It is a sticker that looks like a beer bottle cover, like a design, and it says Rivali's Ale. And it has like a bunch of different things go with it. That says
Legend of Zelda.
Yep,
check it off the bingo card.
Exactly. So
that's pretty. So now, what was this? Was this little share where you got the? Is this where you discovered this, or had you seen it before when you got it for your car?
No, he sent this to me. He sent
it to you, and you went, "Can I buy this?"
He sent to me. It's supposed to be a shirt, but I got it as a sticker for my car because you know me, I gotta have fun stickers. In my car,
look at that, Shane. Like your post has been immortalized on the back of Ryan's lease, probably. Right?
Lease that will be for 3.
It's been semi-immortalized
for 2.5 years, 3.5 years.
It will be peeled off by the dealership in 3 years.
No, technically, you have to peel it off before you return it, or they'll charge you for it.
Right.
So
at which point
it's not fun.
At which point you're going to have to supply Ryan with a new fun sticker.
They actually had a couple other ones. There was another one that was Helion Lager or something like that. It was something else to go with it. So like
way less good a pun.
I know, but still. All right, so I'm going to give the reins to you. You are our room scientist. Yes, you are the resident scientist. You have the degree. I am just a simple bachelor's degree. You are almost to the doctorate or doctorate.
Might make it there someday.
So
maybe
I'm going to hand the start off to you.
Okay. I will then probably hand it back to you fairly quickly. Let's get started. So we... just like last episode, there are 4 sort of topics that we are going to dive into. Some of them are what you might call urban myths, sort of truisms that no one ever really tested. Others are things that are grounded that we just kind of want to explore for ourselves. Other things, we're sort of going all over. So we're going to do 2 experiments before the break. We'll do 2 more after. We are going to be, I'll just give a quick layout of the experiments. We're going to be experiment 1 is going to assess the effect of glass color on beer skunking. It's called being light struck.
Yep.
Experiment 2 is going to be a follow-up to our original temperature experiment. Experiment 3, we are going to delve into differences in ABV and how tastable they are. And in experiment 4, I believe Ryan has something of he's going to use me as a guinea pig for an experiment on the effect of beer color on perceived strength and taste. So 2 before the break, 2 after.
Yep.
So we are going to start, though, with this. Again, it's not a myth. It is the sort of assertion that clear and green bottles result in more light-struck beer compared to brown bottles. So I'm going to read off a little bit of information about this, and then I'm going to pass it off to Ryan because he designed and performed the test. So just a quick note. So there are 2 tests here for which we actually collected tasting data, and we used the triangle test for that. That is fairly standard in a lot of sort of taste, like food and beverage testing. Just to quickly review, the idea is that you have 3 beers, or in this case, 3 beers in front of you. 2 are one condition, the other one is another condition. So say one of the beers has had a drop of flavoring added to it, a drop of vanilla extract or something. So you might have 2 with the vanilla and 1 without, or 1 with the vanilla and 2 without. You don't know. And your job is not to pick which one has the vanilla. It's to pick the odd beer out. Yep. So you have 3. Which one's the odd one out? Theoretically, if you tested 1 million people and you gave them 3 of the exact same beer and you arbitrarily just, directed which one was the quote-unquote correct answer, a third of those people would get it right. So basically, at random guessing, a third gets it right. So 33%. However much higher over 33% you get, we can start to be more and more confident that we're seeing a real difference. Now, we are doing science for fun here. Our sample sizes are way too low for us to really be statistically confident in what we're saying, right? So these are just kind of fun hypothesis generating studies that we're doing. Okay, we have we collected from 8 people in each test. That is generally not high enough to be that confident. So don't take this more as a starting point.
7 people.
Was it 7? I thought it was 8.
You did 5 and then you added 2 more. My math says 7.
Okay.
Close enough.
Okay.
It's still a very small sample size.
In any event, yes. So yeah, either way, well, one way or the other, just remember that going in, okay? Don't take this as fact. It is all suggestive. We're just having fun. It would be wonderful to follow up with a larger sample size experiment, but it is 2022. We're still in the middle of the COVID pandemic, and it's just kind of hard to collect that
And neither
data.
one of us have a PhD, so...
You suck. Okay.
You're close.
Returning to the topic at hand, the conventional wisdom, and again, this is really a fact, not myth. It's provable and has been proven. As beers are exposed to sunlight, they become light struck, or also called skunked. Again, this is an established fact. In clear and green bottles, this apparently can occur in a matter of seconds. We suspect that during transport, imported beers are exposed to really long periods of sunlight, which leads to the impression of Heineken and Corona being very skunky.
Yep.
But it stands to question then, do shorter exposure periods still produce detectable light struck character? And that's what we are testing. So according to beerandbrewing.com, and this is a quote, skunky aromas and flavor in beer occur when certain hop-derived photosensitive compounds, especially isohumulone, react in the presence of riboflavin. I'm sorry, this is very jargony, but to create a chemical compound called MBT, or 3-methyl-2-butane 1-thiol. So that's an organic chemistry term describing the shape of this molecule. The important thing for us is that MBT happens to have a chemical makeup strikingly similar to the scent compounds secreted by skunks.
Yes.
So that is identical. Why our noses interpret it as being very adjacent to skunk smell. So that is a real term. That term has a lot of basis why we think it's skunky. So UV light, as far as I understand, is responsible for this reaction. And brown bottles are way better at blocking UV light or absorbing it than clear or green bottles. So skunking is a particular issue for import beers that are packaged in green and clear bottles because as they go through transport, they sit on a dock or whatever, they can apparently become exposed to this light. We've talked about this on other episodes where Heineken, I think, has done taste tests in America where they determined that because people are so used to it in their bottles, they actually intentionally skunk their kegs before they send them over, or people won't think it tastes like Heineken in America. So interesting, that's a kind of preferences subjective sort of thing. But that is why the association of these green and clear bottle brands is being skunky. So beerandbrewing.com further says, the phenomenon is so predictable that the BJCP, the Beer Judge Certification Program, suggests that if you're training for the BJCP exam, you intentionally expose commercial beers in green bottles to sunlight for 1 to 3 days when you're preparing to taste that flavor in their taste tests.
Interesting.
They actually want you to intentionally skunk beer. So there is a brewlosophy experiment on this subject, and being probably the largest source of these kind of way more scientific, at least higher sample size experiments. I'll be referencing them. Cross it off your bingo card.
As we always do.
They have done one experiment that I found on this topic where they fermented a German Pils in a clear carboy in either sunlight through a window or in the dark.
Okay.
And so it was like, it received about 8 hours of sunlight a day throughout all the fermentation, and their testers were able to reliably distinguish these beers apart, though notably, preference was split almost right down the middle. Okay. So of the people who guessed right, half preferred the skunked beer versus the other half. So again, preference is subjective.
Yeah.
And it's just interesting that, again, maybe this is something people have come to expect as a flavor. Maybe they've normalized to it. Maybe it's, I don't know. I really don't know. But that is what it is. So with all of that in mind, Ryan designed a test to examine this. So why don't you describe exactly how you designed this test?
So what I did was I wanted to get beers that are similar in style, but having a different color and bottle. So
obviously with commercial beer, you're not going to find one beer in 3 different colors of bottle. Yes.
So what I did was I decided to go as basic as possible. So I went with Miller Lite, which is your brown bottle, High Life from Miller as well, which is your clear, and then Dos Equis lager, which is the green.
Right.
Dos Equis is slightly different because it's a Mexican lager compared to regular lagers.
3 different beers, but they're all in the same ballpark, and they're all clean and very simple lager beers.
So what I did was I took two of each kind of bottles, or each kind of beer. One set completely stayed in the fridge. It was obviously exposed to the light in the fridge, but nothing that was dangerous. And the other set was set outside for 6 hours. So a decent amount of time, but it was also winter, so it stayed cold, so you can't blame it on actual heat, but there was sunlight directly hitting the bottle itself. And then what I did was, as we explained, we did a triangle test. I did an experiment on pretty much you guys, you, your wife, my wife, and then our parents-in-laws.
Did we not collect data from you?
No, we did not collect, because I knew exactly what everything was.
That's why you have...
that's why I have 7.
Interesting. Well, okay. That's why I have 8, because I had you guys run the test on me. And I guess we should state that for these triangle tests, they were unblinded. So participants knew going in what the test was about. We explained what we were testing, but they didn't know anything about which samples they had. Yeah.
So they could have had 2 skunk beer, 1 not skunk beer, or vice versa. So like they had to pick
but they at least knew they were testing the effect of skunking, basically, so they could look for that flavor.
So what we determined in everything was you could...
Well, so what were the numbers?
So the numbers was, in the clear bottle, 4 out of 7 could tell the difference between a skunk beer and a not skunk beer.
Okay.
In the green bottle, same numbers, 4 out of 7. In the brown bottle, it was 3 out of 7, so a slight difference. So looking at this, you could actually see that the brown bottle at least protected enough that you could not tell too much difference.
A slightly lower number, right?
Yeah.
So 3 out of 7 is about like 43%. Yep. 4 out of 7, 57%. So definitely, trending towards. And I believe that was borne out in tasting too, right? Where do you happen to remember? Were people generally able to correctly, anyone who got it right, were they able to say whether the odd beer out was skunked or not?
I believe most people were able to determine at least which one was the odd beer out.
Okay.
Except for our father-in-law, who I expected to be the one to actually know the difference.
Well, yeah, right. So basically, of people who got it right, most of them correctly identified which was which.
Yes, exactly.
Which is interesting. It's not, again, this isn't hard science data. It's only one person. Could be random chance, but it's interesting, and it is at least a trend in the direction we would expect.
Yes,
that in a brown beer it's harder.
Yes.
So one other thing that I think is interesting to note is that short of us brewing a beer and putting it into 3 different color bottles, we can't start. You know, if that Dos Equis had been exposed to some sunlight before we got it. It's not a brand I typically associate with skunky flavor, but like...
That's why I went with it.
But we can't guarantee that it wasn't exposed to sunlight before. So it may have been slightly skunked already. It can still skunk more, but that definitely influences the test, is that like these were not all the same starting point.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's just a limitation, but I still think there's value to testing commercial beer because... That's what most people aren't going to drink homebrew out of 3 different colors. Yeah. Most people are going to just drink a commercial beer, and you know, you might carry it outside with you, and you might you just might want to know. Yeah.
Again, we're not full scientists. We're not on Myth-Busters. As
I mean, are they full scientists?
They are actually.
Are they?
They are. Or at least the 3 that the 3 newbies that they brought in partway through it.
Okay.
Were like they had like doctorates and crap like that. The other
really
2, I think,
throwing a lot of shade on the on graduate education in this episode. Rubbing some salt in the wound.
You're getting there, man. You're getting there.
So that's pretty interesting. So again, as a follow-up, we could potentially take another beer in the future, bottle it in multicolored bottles, and test it. But at least so far, this is very, very soft evidence. Now, I will say for myself, I did poorly on these. I did generally poorly.
You were the worst.
There is...
Our father-in-law was still the worst.
Well, but...
And actually, you're the 2 that you...
Hey, it's data. We don't need to throw shade at individuals here.
But the data that you gathered from your neighbors, they did not do very well either.
Yeah, but again, like, these are data points. It doesn't really... It's not like we've all... It's not like we each took the test 10 times. Yeah. So it's one guess. You know, you can't draw too much from that. We can only look at the overall numbers. But I know in my own experience, I expected, because I know I don't like brands I consider to be skunky because they taste skunky to me. But I found this surprisingly hard, and it kind of makes me wonder if I'm less sensitive to that compound, which is it's a real thing. Like, some people are not as sensitive to this. That's an established thing that some people are less sensitive to certain flavors than others. Yeah. I didn't feel like, you know, even if the ones I got right, I felt like I was guessing on all of these personally. How did you feel? Did you feel like you could tell the difference?
I think I did. I was okay with it. We using Miller as a source for it. I'm not a Miller fan. I never liked the flavor of Miller. It already has to me. It already has a bad flavor, but
it makes it
adding the sunlight to it, I think, made it stick out a little more. And if I remember correctly, I think I did. I think I got 2 out of 3 with doing. Oh no, I didn't do the test. So, but I know.
I thought we still at least poured you some.
I don't think we did, but I remember Mallory, my wife, did very well. I think she got 3 out of 3. She was able to pick out which one was
more
which.
Sensitive, yeah.
But she doesn't drink a lot of beer, so maybe that skunkiness would stick out a
little
more.
That's a funny thing, you know. Like in our last test, we happened to notice that Haley was really sensitive to all of the tests we did on Two Hearted, even though she doesn't like IPAs.
Yes.
So it's like, It's a weird thing, you know. It's like if you don't like mushrooms on pizza, are you more sensitive to different brands of mushrooms on pizza than someone who does like mushrooms on pizza?
So, Mallory doesn't drink a lot of beer. She drinks other things, but so she had this beer.
Interesting. It's like if it wasn't good to her in the first place, should that make her more sensitive, or is it really just that like her palate is very sensitive to this compound, whereas other people might not be?
I think it's just more sensitive to beer in general, and then like not liking beer, and then all of a sudden tasting something that's not liking beer but worse because it's skunked. I think that sticks out just a little more for her. Because Rich, obviously our father-in-law drinks a lot of beer. He struggled trying to figure them all out. I think he got one. I think he got one out of three.
3 tests where they're all different. Yeah, we can't draw a ton from that. But yeah, no, it's definitely interesting it's interesting to think about. Should we move on to the next test?
Yes, this one's the temperature follow-up. So I remember this one from last time.
Right. So last time we discussed several chilling and or insulation methods for keeping a beer cold, including a traditional fabric koozie, an air-lined koozie, a frosted mug, so like just a regular glass mug that you stuffed in the freezer, and then an iced freezer mug, which is one of those hollow plastic mugs with like liquid inside. In it. Yep. So temperatures were measured before and after a 10-minute period. The frosted and the freezer mugs performed the best, but we suspected that because they would eventually warm up, that effect might fade. Really you have 2 of them were like chilling methods, and 2 of them, the koozies, are really more insulation methods. So we suspect that over a longer time, the effectiveness of the mugs might fade as they warm up to room temperature.
Yeah.
And then they're just glass or plastic, and they're less effective insulators than a koozie.
Yeah.
So basically the mugs are effective chillers, but not effective insulators. So their effectiveness might have a shorter time span. So in this test, we took the temperature out to 30 minutes, which I think if it's the summer, you're having something light and you're having it outside, I think 30 minutes is a reasonable time to finish a beer.
Yeah. Yeah.
10 minutes, maybe not, but
technically it should take you an hour because it takes you an hour to actually process the alcohol in one beer.
Yeah, okay. If you're trying not to get a buzz, then that's fine.
I was about to say, if you're want to be legal and drive, yes.
If you want to drive, maybe, but okay, So this temperature test was taken out for 30 minutes. I used bottles of Harp Pale Lager at room temp, starting at 43 degrees Fahrenheit, which was just the measured temperature they came out of the refrigerator at.
Okay.
So this, sadly, we could not repeat with the iced freezer mug we used last time because they broke and my parents threw them away. But I did introduce a new element, which is the Chilsner.
Oh, I thought you did the Chilsner last time.
We didn't. We were gonna, and then as I remember it, I begged off it at the last minute. I couldn't find data on the Chilsner from last time. But maybe I did. If I did, maybe I should have gone back and listened to the episode more recently. But basically, it's this little metal insert that you stick into a bottle that you put in the freezer. It's metal, so it transfers chilling. It transfers heat or a lack of heat very effectively. You put it in the freezer, and then you just stick it in your bottle. You have to take a sip first, which kind of throws off the data a little bit because it's not the same amount of beer, but otherwise it'll overflow. And then you just shove it in your bottle, you drink right out of it, and it just kind of keeps your beer chilled. So we have the Chilsner, and then we have returning the frosted mug, the fabric koozie, the air-lined koozie, and then for reference, just a bottle on its own.
Yeah.
This test was, again, we keep doing these episodes at the wrong time of year. So it's not summer. It's not summer heat. These tests are conducted at room temperature inside a house. But 30 minutes. And so what if you had to guess here, where would you kind of think things would line up? So you've got the bottle, fabric koozie, the air-lined koozie, the Chilsner, and the frosted mug.
In my experience, I know the frosted mug is been talked about as not a great thing. It just loses its temperature really fast. I've seen that and read it multiple reviews. I'm going to say the streamlined koozie is probably the best. It's going to be my guess.
Okay. All right. So here's the data. So again, starting temp 43 degrees Fahrenheit. I'm sorry for any Celsius listeners. I won't be Google can do it for you. But so the bottle raised by about 10 degrees. It was 53.1. So a 10 degree increase in just the bottle at room temperature over 30 minutes.
Okay.
The fabric koozie, 52.5. So not much better. About a half a degree less warming up. Performed similarly poorly to last time.
Yeah.
Where it was
I do remember
somehow inexplicably it was warmer.
Yeah.
Than the...
I mean...
I actually think it's... So we'll get back to it. Yeah. Let me just read off the data.
Keep going. So
the airline koozie dropped or increased to 48.2. So that is about a 5 degree increase. So it halved the increase.
Okay.
The Chilsner was down at 44.2. So that only rose by 1 degree.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And the frosted mug was exactly 43 degrees still. So it did not increase in temperature at all. Presumably it dropped and then came back up to 43 degrees, right? So, so again, the frosted mug performed the best out of any, even over 30 minutes. And that is surprising to me.
Very surprising, actually.
Because I would have thought that the sort of effect of it would have been gone after about 5 or 10 minutes.
Yes, agreed.
But we should note, one thing I will say now, mugs you don't hold the beer, but I think koozies are most effective when you are holding a beer because the koozie's already room temperature. So it's going to transfer whatever it transfers. It's already at room temperature. It's going to be sort of warming up the beer via direct contact. But if you're holding it, your hand is way warmer than a koozie, a room temperature koozie is. And so I think, I was not about to hold every single one, have a person hold every single one of these beers for 30 minutes.
No, I think about not doing that.
But I still think there's value to a koozie. I think that if you're going to be holding the beer the whole time, if you're at a campfire or something, it's going to work a lot better where your hand would warm up a bottle very rapidly.
Yeah.
But the koozie will sort of attenuate that. Another note is that the koozie does allow for repeat usage, whereas, again, the mug, which performed best, and the Chilsner both need to be stuck in the freezer for an extended period of time in between uses. Yes. You can only keep so many frosted mugs in your house at once, unless you have like a chest freezer full of them. So
someone might.
Right, someone might. And then again, so this doesn't account for summer temps. So maybe a half an hour outside in a frosted mug would be trash. Yeah. And it would be better to have an airline koozie, which, like you said, to me feels like it should be the best. But just keeps not bearing out in the data. Yeah. But I feel like that's a big part of it is, are you holding it? How warm is it? So I don't know. This is interesting. What do you think about this?
I do agree. Like, I think that the hand and the heat from your hand in general does have an effect. I know in general, because we have these pretty cool looking koozies that insulate and everything. So I think this is what you use, correct?
That is what I use. Okay. Yeah. So Ryan is holding it. It's an air-lined koozie that it can be used for like a bottle of beer, or you can kind of twist it off and use it for a can as well. So I use the bottle configuration since it is a bottle. Okay. Yeah. Really? Okay. So to lose only 5 degrees over 30 minutes, or to raise only 5 degrees over 30 minutes, under 50, that's still good.
Yeah, that's still pretty good. I mean, I think that's, to me, because with holding a chilled mug, a chilled mug usually has a handle, so it does help it from your hand warming it up as well. But let me ask this: when you were doing this test, you were inside, correct? Yeah. So no real direct sunlight.
Yeah, the house
or
was 68 or something. Okay. I don't remember.
Because I'm thinking we should, when we go down up to Lexington for our summer vacation, we should do this experiment on the beach with direct. If we have,
it would be
sunlight.
Nice to.
I think that would be the ultimate test.
We'll have to bring all of these implements too. Yes. But you're right, because ultimately this is something you're gonna do it in the summer. I would also argue, though, that you might do it at a campfire. It's that's another one. It may not be in full summer sun. And actually, that brings me to another interesting point, which is a chilled mug is cold to hold. The koozies work both ways, where they not only prevent, I'll use a koozie in the winter because it keeps the beer from making my hand cold.
Yeah.
Whereas that is not something that a chilling method like a koozie or a Chilsner is going to solve for you.
Now, and also I think you mentioned this too, like with a koozie, whether it's streamline or fabric, you can just pop one in and go. But with the Chilsner...
Right, you can leave your house and you can go to a tailgate and use a koozie all
exactly,
morning.
Yes. But like with a Chilsner or with a frosted mug, you have to, like you said, you have to have either a chest full of frosted mugs or a chest full of Chilsners. And Chilsners are kind of expensive.
Yeah.
Right? So
you could store way more in a chest freezer. You could probably store about a billion of them.
True. But like I feel like in reality, I still think the koozie itself is still a better option.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's more practical, though I am going to continue using the frosted mug at my parents' probably because I go through beer fast enough that I believe it will help. Though, going back to the last experiment, a koozie out by the pool is going to skunk.
Yeah? Yeah.
Whether I can taste it, it seems like not. And honestly, I do that at my parents all the time, and I've never noticed like my Oberon getting skunky or whatever. So apparently, I'm just trash at tasting that.
Well, see, here's the other thing too. This is coming from someone who has to, and we both of us have to deal with this. If you use a koozie, that's less dishes. If you use a frosted mug, you have a
more
mug
dishes,
and multiple mugs to clean because you're going to go through multiple mugs.
I'm the dish doer at our house, so
as am I.
That's important. Yeah, that's very important.
So. I think, in my opinion, and non-science in any way, shape, or form, I think the koozie...
That's why I use the frosted mug in my parents' house.
But yeah, we use a koozie at our houses, and also, honestly, like I don't use a koozie that often at my own house. The only time I really bring out the koozie is when we are up at the cottage on the beach in the sun, because I know it's going to keep the beer a little bit cooler, hopefully, compared to if I'm just drinking the bottle or can itself.
True that.
Yep. But also, I drink those pretty fast, so like a half hour, I don't think it's going to last.
I mean, you almost don't need anything.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, it is. It's the kind of the simple, reliable option. I agree.
I'm already excited for that vacation. It is at time recording this February. I'm excited for August.
By the time we get back, you know what I'm excited for actually? That's coming up soon. You know what happens March 21st? Oberon Day. It's so close.
It's so close.
And the beautiful thing is that, incidentally, it's also the first day of spring, so that might be marginally related, but like the weather Oberon is the harbinger of nice weather in Michigan. Like it comes out, the weather gets nice. But then it snows, and then it gets nice, then it snows, then it gets nice, and then it snows. But like the first nice weather almost always falls right around there. So to look at our like calendar and go, oh my God, it's so close. Like it really makes me happy. We're almost out of winter. That is neither here nor there.
Yes.
So let's take a short siesta.
Yes.
And then we will come back.
A sabbatical, you could say.
Sabbatical. Sure. I'm not sure you're using that term correctly here.
Take a sabbatical as a teacher or something like that.
Yeah, for like a whole semester.
Take a sabbatical for like 30 minutes.
A very short sabbatical potty break. And then we will be back for more testing.
And then I will prep the next test. Cheers.
Cheers.
Psst, hey you. Come over here.
Who, me?
Yeah, you.
Okay.
Hey, do you like Zelda?
Yeah, I like Zelda. Who doesn't?
Oh, yeah? You like video games?
Yeah, I dabble. I play them, yeah.
Yeah. Do you like listening to people talk about video games?
Of course I like listening to people. Who reads anymore?
Well, buddy, do I got a podcast for you. It's called Fan Fiction, with an X.
Oh.
And you can find it on all your major podcast distributors.
That sounds amazing.
Oh, buddy, you have no idea.
One question, though. Why are you in my room?
Welcome to our new podcast. Welcome to our new podcast.
This isn't working.
Agreed. I think we're going to have to do it
turn by turn?
Well, now that you mention it, we are a brand new RPG video game podcast.
Our very existence hinges on turn-based gaming.
So join us on the Turn by Turn podcast, where we'll be talking about
Pokemon, Fire Emblem, Golden Sun, Shining Force, Mother, and so many more.
It's your turn to come and join us.
And we are back. So, we are going to do live on-air experiment on you, Mike. And
Goody.
So, I have poured 2 beers here. Looking at them, they are both dark.
They look identical to me. I would believe they're the same beer, but I feel like they're probably not.
You don't know this. It could be. It's a blind test. So, what? Well, it's partly blind. You know what the test is.
I know it's at least. Well, just continue.
I'll continue. So, this test is to see if you could tell the difference between a dark beer and a light beer that has just been darkened. So if you could actually tell the difference between a light and dark beer.
Can you explain that a little bit? What do you mean when you say a light beer that has been darkened?
I will explain. So there is a ingredient that you can add to beer. It's called Cinnamar. And what it is a strict coloring pretty much without flavor being added to the beer.
But not a dye, right? If I understand, it's actually grain derived.
Yes.
They just remove all of the flavor compounds as much as they can.
So I put about... Let's see, about 4 milliliters into the one that is light and is, as you said, as dark as the other one is.
Yeah.
So the question is...
I truly can't tell the difference between these two. Even the foam is the same color.
Yep, I made sure of that. Don't worry.
You did well.
So, I will hand those off to you.
Oh, boy.
And your goal is to tell me which one is the actual dark beer.
So, interesting. first point. You put 4 milliliters into 3 ounces, and that was what it took to darken about 3 ounces of beer to this color. I find that interesting. I was curious how much Cinnamar it would take.
Yeah.
Okay, so let me see. First, again, these look identical. Sort of tan foam, though there's not much foam on these at this point. And like jet black almost. Maybe I hold it up to the light, still jet black.
Still jet black.
Okay, so this one to me, interesting. Okay, I feel like that might be the one, because that doesn't taste like what I expect a beer this dark to taste like.
I did get 2 beers that are similar. So,
and I don't know what the other style of beer is. This one to me, it's almost like I don't want to call it tart exactly, but it's like adjacent to that.
Okay.
It doesn't have the roasty flavors I would expect. Maybe. No, I'm getting almost a little bit of bitterness, which is not off brand for a stout. And maybe even like a little... I think I'm tricking myself.
Overthinking
That's one of the funny psychological things. But yeah, I almost convinced myself I was getting some vanilla. Now I'm not. Now I'm not so sure. Okay, let me take a palate cleanser.
Yep.
A little sip of water. Huh. This one kind of smells hoppy too. Son of a beast. So, this to me, again, I'm getting... It's almost like a black IPA flavor, which I feel like is just very tricksy. But okay, let me go back to the first one. This is way harder than I expected it to be.
I made it that way.
You know what? Hold on. Oh, did you screw with me? Did you straight up find a black IPA or something, you jerk?
Okay, I confirm or deny this.
Okay, so, hold on. I'm going to do these with... Here. Wait, have you been
Yeah, I'm watching.
Okay, good. Okay, I've got myself nice and confused.
What do we got?
Son of a bitch. Oops. They taste almost identical to me. I am going to say that this one is the stout. Or the truly dark beer. The originally dark beer.
You are incorrect.
No!
So, I did trick you.
Those were so hard. They didn't taste the same, but neither tasted as... Whoa!
So
okay.
I did trick you. So
very clever.
So Two Hearted makes Bell's makes a heart package in which you have the Two Hearted, the lighthearted. This
is the dark beer.
Yep. And then you have your Black Hearted, which is a black IPA, and then a Cold Hearted, which is a cold IPA.
So it's funny. I'm glad I flipped them because the foam for this one's a little darker, and I was gonna go off of that, but I was trying really hard to go.
It changed the foam. I actually had to mix it up because there was a mix of the light color foam and the dark color foam.
But yeah, I wonder if they use Cinemark. Probably they don't though. Like we can assume they use roasted grains.
I would assume maybe some Cinemark for coloring, but like to pour these out again. In somewhat fresh glasses. So
this is a really cool, like, kind of whale skeleton or something.
So that's what it's supposed to look like compared to what it ended up turning out to be.
Yeah. So.
And you guys can't see it, but like it's night and day. Like the black IPA, the Black Hearted, it almost looks stout like. But the the Cold Hearted is definitely more of a
side by side of like the Cold Hearted with and without the flavor. But the problem is that there's such a lower volume in the little sample you gave me that it's warmed up and it's hard to tell the difference.
Yeah.
And if you stirred them, like it's a little flatter too.
Yeah.
But it doesn't taste appreciably different.
Yeah.
This is a really interesting test because I really don't. Presumably for a black IPA, they used a lot of lightly or huskless, like kind of low bittering roasted grains.
Yeah.
But I cannot tell the difference. Which begs the question, to make a black IPA, can you just add a little Cinemark?
You probably could.
Now, personally, I like a little roasted flavor in my black IPA, but like if you're one of those people who believes that a black IPA should taste like a regular IPA and just look dark... Mm-hmm. Might not be a terrible option.
And like I know you're gonna streamline into your part with the differences in AB. Well, no, difference ABV is a different one. But to go off with this,
I've got some notes on this.
Well,
yeah, I truly, even knowing, I can't taste the difference.
Yeah. So I know
maybe it's because I know that I can't.
Yeah. And the story is like usually when you see a dark beer, you're gonna assume that it's a strong beer. It's a high ABV. And when you see a light colored beer, you're gonna assume that it's pretty light. I can tell you right now, I have the numbers here. A dark colored beer, which an SRM coloring, which is the color base. So like a color 5 is gonna be your lager or 2 or whatever. To a 40, which is as high as it actually goes, is going to be your darkest beer. A Guinness, we talked about this in a previous episode, 4.2%. A Rogue Mocha Porter is 5.6%.
Yeah, Perrin Black Ale's 5.8, I think.
Budweiser, 5%. PBR, 4.8%.
Yeah, so both stronger than Guinness.
Yes, both stronger than Guinness. Yes.
Say, yeah.
And then there are some other instances. So like KBS Stout, which we know KBS is a very strong flavor stout.
Right, but
is 11.2.
Right, but the original Bourbon Barrel Ale is like 10 point something, and that's an amber ale.
Exactly.
It looks amber.
Or we can go Final Absolution. Final Absolution is a light Belgian lager. Or Belgian ale, I should say, and that's 10%.
Right. Well, and there are Belgian golden and like Belgian golden strong ales and like triples that even go above that.
Yep. So comparing dark beers and light beers as one's strong and one's not, it's definitely not there. I think it just depends on what you're making it with.
Roasted grain really barely adds any sugar. It's all been cooked out almost at that point. Like there's very little fermentable sugar in roasted grain. Yeah. So you're absolutely right. Like from a homebrew perspective, making a beer dark does nothing to make it stronger, despite the fact that people have that perception. So
exactly.
So here's interesting. So
there you go.
First
I'm
of
drink
all,
these samples now.
So there's actually a psychological study that I found done on this. So it's Carvalho et al. Frontiers in Psychology, 2017.
Oh, they did a test on this, but not the test on bottles.
Oh, not on this exactly. But,
okay.
So it's the title of the article, and this is open access, so you can just Google it and find it. The Influence of Color on the Consumer's Experience of Beer. So they didn't explicitly say it, but it's from like a malting company. So I imagine they are malt-derived coloring agents, similar to Cinnamar, but not Cinnamar, to produce an amber and a dark version of a blonde ale recipe.
Okay.
Why there's not a blonde version, I'm not exactly sure, but maybe so there's a little bit of that compound in both of them.
Yeah.
But then the consumers filled out a survey about the beers both before and after tasting and rated their expected and actual preference as well as their expected and actual perception of sweetness, sourness, bitterness, strength, and body. So they had participants do a triangle test with opaque cups where they couldn't see the beers.
Yeah.
And there were no differences in taste. So the participants couldn't tell the beers apart when they couldn't see them.
Okay.
So the amber and the dark tasted the same. But on average, the consumers expected the darker beer to be stronger, more bitter, and have more body than the amber beer. Mm-hmm. They also expected to like it less and for it to be more expensive. So there's apparently also a perception that darker beers are pricier because maybe they're more craft. They're or whatever,
more into it to make it that color.
Interestingly, though, their ratings after tasting were not significantly different. Meaning these participants did not rate the beers as tasting different once they actually tasted them. So that kind of, it doesn't contradict exactly, but it is not consistent with my experience here it is consistent with my experience of like not really, you know what? It's completely separate. I couldn't tell two different beers apart. These people were given the same beer with a different color. Mm-hmm. And after tasting, they could tell the difference. Yeah. So their bias was enough that it influenced what they expected, but it didn't influence what they tasted, which is actually interesting. I would have expected that they would have tasted what they thought they were going to taste.
I actually almost thought about doing just pouring the Cold Hearted into 2 glasses and putting Cinnamar in one of them.
Yeah.
To see if you could tell the difference.
And just saying, but the weird thing is you'd had to structure it as like almost in a different episode where it's like, well, here's Cold Hearted and then here's their black IPA. Yeah. What differences do you get? And then when I'm like, I get much more roasty character in this one, you go, false.
Now let me ask you this.
They're the same.
Let me ask you this. Judging off these 2 beers, what would you guess the ABV?
I would just go off what I know Two Hearted is and say it's about 7%.
Yeah, they're both 7.
Okay.
So
I have prior information.
Yeah, that's true. I'll give you that. But I was actually, I thought the Cold Hearted was actually lighter, but it is. I'm looking at it right now. They're both 7%.
No, to me, I can't tell the difference because you didn't serve me Cold Hearted till after. So so very, very, very interesting stuff. Like it's interesting what our perception does to our ability to taste. Mm-hmm. But this experiment kind of shows it's also interesting what it doesn't do. Where like, despite these beers looking the same, I couldn't tell the difference. Mm-hmm. Despite these in the experiment, the beers looking different, they were normalized once people actually tasted them. They were actually able to overcome their biases and just taste what was there, which I find really fascinating because I would have definitely assumed that they would have allowed, their brain would have invented roasty flavors in the dark beer. Yeah. And that didn't happen. I found that very surprising.
Yeah.
Okay.
I will say if you want to find this, it's at Meyer. It's a hard pack. Yeah.
I really like I don't know what the weird balloon thing over top, but like the Blackhearted has like a whale skeleton or something on it's like a pretty cool, creepy label, isn't it?
Yeah, that is really cool.
Okay, so moving on. So the final test is whether people can reliably tell differences in ABV. So this was another triangle-based test. So the wisdom here is that most craft beer drinkers have taken a drink of a beer they know was high octane and commented, "Whoo, you can really taste the alcohol there."
Yeah.
You know, everybody said that. I've definitely said it. You have a Belgian triple or something, you go, surprisingly smooth, but you can definitely taste the alcoholic bite or what, whatever.
Or the scary one is, it's strong, but you don't taste it.
Well, that's the scary thing, but that's what we're testing. Can we really tell that difference?
Yeah.
So now, there are multiple ways to approach this problem. So in Brewlosophy, they have done multiple tests on mash temperature where you can basically, so for non-brewers, if you mash a whole grain recipe, if you're doing brew in a bag or
bringing in your grains or extracts.
If you're doing any kind of a whole grain brewing process, you can control the temperature at which those grains are mashed. And a higher temperature is going to produce longer chain sugars, less fermentable wort. So the same grains at a lower mash temperature are going to produce a lower final gravity and therefore a higher ABV beer.
Yeah.
So you can have the same recipe and just change low versus high mash temperature, and you can control the ABV of the beer. Now, it's not a guaranteed that you are only changing ABV, though. You're leaving sugars in the beer, so that could be detectable. Also, if you're making a darker beer or like a beer with more character malts, you don't know for sure whether the difference in temperature is in extracting different flavor compounds from those character malts. That's been proposed as well. So it's not just an ABV difference, but they've done 3 different experiments. They found that people failed to distinguish both a pale Belgian strong ale and a pale lager with a difference of 1 to 1.6%.
Okay.
So that's not the strength of the beer, that's the difference between 1 and 1.5% almost. Participants couldn't tell these beers apart. They then did a English porter with a 1.5 ABV difference, and participants could distinguish the two.
Yeah.
So that kind of almost supports the hypothesis that maybe if you have a lot of character grains, then mash temperature makes more of a difference and you're extracting different flavors.
Yeah.
But maybe if it's a simpler beer, you're not extracting different flavors and that difference in ABV makes less of a difference. So regardless, another point is that our perception of kind of alcoholiness can be based on more than just ethanol. For instance, in a strong Belgian ale or a lot of strong, like high ABV ales, it's not just the alcohol you're tasting things called higher alcohols, which are actually, they're not ethanol. They don't make you drunk. They're flavor compounds that yeast can create during the fermentation process, especially when they're stressed, particularly fusel alcohols, which can give the impression of like a hot flavor. Or in rare cases, I've almost tasted it as like a rubbing alcohol. If they're too high, it's really unpleasant. It's almost like it's like you're drinking rubbing alcohol. It's really gross. So we tested this in a way more janky, but
it worked,
but potentially slightly more direct method where we basically, what I did is I designed a test where I added grain alcohol, so Everclear, which is kind of generally accepted. So in Michigan, we can't get the 190 proof or whatever. The insane stuff, we can get 151, which is, it's like roughly 75% alcohol. And grain alcohol, like Everclear, is generally considered to be about as flavorless as grain alcohol, as like alcohol can get.
Yeah.
So you are adding alcohol, but you're not adding much other flavor compared to something like vodka or whiskey or gin or whatever. So what we basically did, if you take a 12-ounce beer, you subtract a teaspoon of the beer and you add a teaspoon of either rubbing alcohol. Oh, thank you. Yes, that's my
spoon. Now you actually did that?
Yeah, the very teaspoon that I used in this test. Thank you for returning it. it raises the ABV of a 5% beer by about 1%. So the test was we tested samples of a German Pilsner, the Weihenstephan Pilsner, or an American IPA, that being Dogfish Head 60-minute IPA, which is, so the German Pilsner goes from about 5% to 6%. The American IPA goes from 6 to 7. So it's the same difference percentage-wise. It doesn't quite work out. But basically, we wanted to test, okay, in a simple beer and in a beer with more hop character to maybe cover up, what would be the difference in our ability to test or to correctly assess ABV? So in the Pilsner, I tested this on 8 people because unlike Ryan's test, I had Haley sort of randomize some beers and perform the test on me as well. So we got 8 data points. In the Pils, 5 out of 8 correctly determined the higher ABV beer. And interestingly, so that's 63% rounding to the nearest whole number. So that's like about double what you'd expect from random chance. Not a super high sample number, but interestingly, every single person who got it right correctly determined whether their odd beer out was higher or lower. Yeah. Indicating that they were at least the people who got it right, like pretty confidently knew what it was they had in front of them.
And I was definitely one of those people. I knew when we did this test, when I did my triangle test, and when I did it, I had, if I remember correctly, I had 2 strong and 1 weak. And I knew that it was the weaker one. I knew, like, hands down, without a doubt.
Similarly, I knew right away. Like, I definitely tasted an alcoholic bite. And we surmised afterwards, is this just because Everclear, it turns out, is not flavorless and you can taste the sort of bite from it? Or is it because a simple beer with alcohol but no grain, no additional grain added to it, does that, like, can you taste the kind of missing balance? Yeah. You know, and we don't know. You know, similar, like I said, I would argue that the brewlosophy tests have some limitations in that you can't guarantee that mash temperature is only affecting alcohol. Yeah. We here also can't guarantee that we are only affecting it. We're probably adding something from that Everclear. There's probably some flavor that's coming along. But it's a burn. No test here is perfect. Yeah. So, short of using, I'm not going to lie, the thought did cross my mind to bring home pure ethanol from work, but you can get fired for that. So,
as someone that was your HR representative, yes, you could. Not going to do
that. Like, that's a horrible idea. So, but the thought at least crossed my mind. So we then tested the same test on Dogfish Head's 60-minute IPA, which, as we've covered in a previous episode, is an East Coast IPA.
Yes, it has a lot of flavor to it.
So lots of tropical flavor, but still some bitterness. So somewhere along the road between a more traditional American IPA and a New England IPA. Yes. In that test, 2 out of 8, so 25%, slightly less than random guessing, though close enough that, you could basically round to it being random guessing. Yes. Got this test right. And interestingly, I believe, I didn't write this one down, but I think only one of those 2 people correctly identified what their odd beer out was.
That is correct. I remember, at least in our main group that we did.
One of them got it wrong and one of them got it right. So, again, these are very small sample sizes. We can't make strong statistical conclusions, but this is pretty striking. Both the difference in percentage and also just the fact that, people who got the Pilsner one right were very confident what they had. And here it was split, 1 out of 2, but still, I personally found that I had a lot more trouble when there was a bit more flavor in the beer to contend with.
Agreed. And if I remember correctly, when we were doing this test, there were some people that did choose the wrong one, but when they said whether this is the weaker one or this is a stronger one, they were correct on that. But they didn't realize there was another one that was also strong and also weak.
Right. And it's hard to say whether that was just a good guess or... Yeah. But yeah, it was really interesting. And again, it should be granted that these beers were not identical ABV, so 6 to 7% is not the same as 5 to 6%.
But I think it's the flavor, because I remember you said you wanted to do the Pilsner twice. You wanted to do a 1% difference
and a 2% difference. But like the 1% was so obvious to a lot of people. So we just didn't do that.
It makes me it with an IPA, and we were lucky we had 2 cans of Dogfish 60-minute to do this, so like it worked out perfectly. But like I think because when I did the Pilsner, I don't know if it was the taste of the Everclear or whatever, the grain alcohol, but like I've had apple pie, which for those who don't know,
you got a bit of a moonshine thing.
It's a moonshine effect where like you have Everclear with apple cider and cinnamon. And
it's
stuff
just
like
whatever flavors there is insufficient to cover up the alcohol.
You can still feel the burn of Everclear, and that's what I felt when I did it with the Pilsner. I could not tell that difference though as strongly with the IPA, because I think I did actually guess. I guessed the odd one out was a stronger one, and I was right.
And it was, but you got the odd one out wrong.
Yes.
Which means that, and ultimately the triangle test is hard.
Yes.
Like it's so hard.
That's why it's there.
It's really hard, yeah. Mm-hmm. And that's part of the reason you need big sample sizes is you're trying to say not everybody's going to be sensitive to the same thing, so you need 20 or 30 people minimum to say with statistical confidence, the average person can tell these 2 conditions apart.
Yeah.
We don't have that, but it was interesting, and I definitely think that this is, something I'm at least going to kind of believe going forward, that like if we got 2 big Russian Imperials, one of them's 10% and one of them's even like 8.5 or something, like a 1.5 to maybe even it's only 8. I bet I'm not going to be able to taste the difference in ABV between those two because there's so many flavors.
Yeah, exactly.
Whereas in a real pale lager, that is going to make more of a difference. And so maybe if you're designing a pale lager, you want to be more cognizant of that because there's less in there, there's less flavors. It's made to be a fairly neutral beer. Mm-hmm. The balance of alcohol to flavor is going to matter a little more.
Yeah. No, agreed, 100%. I think it was it was a fun test because I remember we were doing it, and like you said, like we were going to do the 2%, and it was just like, well, almost everyone got it right.
Right.
What's the point of this?
Maybe this isn't.
Yeah. But it makes it's intriguing that when you add flavors to kind of cover up that ethanol flavor, that ethanol feel, it's harder to tell now.
Yeah. So okay, let's discuss. We've had 4 good experiments. I'm interested, what do you think there's anything we can follow up on in our next episode? The one thing I'll throw out is that the idea of bottling a homebrew in 3 different colors of glass, I think is a good one. I think we should do that because it'd be a way more controlled test, and we could guarantee that no skunking has occurred before.
Prior, yes.
Anything else from these that you would like to follow up on? Please don't say the temperature experiment.
I do have one, but it's going to be on the beach.
Okay.
Do that on the beach.
I do like that.
Or at a bonfire, like you said, where it's going to be effective.
We're not holding it, but it is at least hot.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Mm-hmm. I think that's a good idea and relatively easy.
And I think the other one too is going with ABV tests, doing a 2% increase with an IPA or something like that to see what's the level. Like even take an IPA and just be like, okay, we already did 1%. Here's a 2%. Okay. Now here's 3%. Here's 4%. And then get to the point where everyone is starting to catch on and see what that percentage is.
So one thing that crosses my mind that just sounds complicated. And again, maybe someday we'll sort of be comfortable collecting large data sets. But for the first 2 years, been 2021 and 2022. We just haven't wanted to. But having... like the tasting survey we used in our Zelda collab episode, giving people that.
Ooh, yes.
For 2 beers, one which was made dark with Cinnamar, and seeing the extent of. So maybe, have them do a tasting profile and see whether they rate the beers as significantly different. The same beer, light and dark, and have them do a survey on both, and then compare those 2. Knowing that they're basically the same beer.
That would be a phenomenal idea, I think.
And then if we had a way to the cups that we use, it's hard not to look in them.
Yes.
So we'd almost need little sippy cup lids or something to do a true triangle test. I'd love to do a triangle test on Cinnamar just to make sure that it's actually flavorless.
Keep them both in brown bottles, and you have to drink from the bottle.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Yeah.
Yeah,
because if you look at this, you can't tell the difference.
Well, and no one's looking down, and even if you do look down, the bottom's brown, so it's hard to tell.
Yeah.
That's a good idea.
I think that. Yeah, I think we can add on to these for next season.
So let's say taste profiling.
Yep.
On artificially colored beers.
Yes, I think that's a great one, and I think maybe when we do go to our wonderful summer vacation, we do a true
summer temp test.
Yeah, summer temp test.
Well, hey, we almost have Myth-Brewsters. That my phone auto-corrected to summer temp Etsy. But we almost have a whole other episode set up.
I would say, yeah, we can definitely do a follow-up episode for most of these things. I think the only one maybe is probably the temperature. No, that's all of them. Except for that's all 4 of them. Yeah, I'm just going to say all 4 of them.
Beauteous.
There you go. That makes less work for us to figure out which one to do.
You know what, Ryan? I want to cheers to that, but I think first we need to do our outro. So, if you would like to find our podcast,
where can you find us?
You can find us on Twitter at Brewthers-In-Law or on our website at brewthers-in-law.com.
Hold for dramatic pause.
Hold for dramatic pause. If you followed us this far and never heard our outro. So that's all one word, spelled the same way as this podcast. Ryan, where additionally can people find wonderful adjacent content on TikTok? I almost said Twitch.
I'm not on Twitch.
Gamer's showing.
I'm about to say. I can't. There's so many of them. I can't get track of them. You have to find a bunch of
beer-related games to play. There are
beer-related games.
So
Mel's playing Stardew Valley right now, and she's starting to do. You can make beer and mead.
Apparently, pale ale is just made from hops and nothing else. But also, Stardew Valley is incredible, so I'm not knocking it. But
it sounds like you are.
There's a cozy game like that coming out too that is basically running a winery. Which I'm really interested in. But it gets into the nitty gritty of the properties of the grapes and stuff. It looks really cool.
Well, I know Shane told us about a game that's on PlayStation that is about brewing beer itself, making sure you're raising up the temperature right and putting in ingredients at the right time.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
We thought we talked about this. I think we did it on a listener feedback because he mentioned it on a listener feedback.
Possibly. But yeah, so we're off on a tangent now. But additionally, Ryan, where can the good people get a hold of you?
On Twitter, I am at Rambo Kuhn. That's RAMBOKUHN. For brewing related things, you can find me at Wise Old Owl Brews. And then, like Mike said, TikTok, I have branched my way into the Zennials. And honestly, beer talk is a huge thing.
I mean,
it is a huge thing.
That's one does. Yeah.
So there's a ton of stuff. Bourbon talk. There's so many different things you can find. If you just make a TikTok account and not post a video, which I know a lot of people do, and just follow things,
I probably could.
You will love
on Facebook.
Yes, exactly.
But I also, every time I log on Facebook, go, should I delete this?
No. But if you set yourself really for beer talk, bourbon talk, and maybe Star Wars or whatever, whatever things you want to sit into, you'll get only that content and maybe get a few things here and there. I get a ton of beer and bourbon content. That's all I get now.
Thirsty at work.
I know, right? But so if you want to follow me there, I'm at Wise Old Owls Brew. All beer stuff, some whiskey because we did the advent calendar. I posted the videos for the advent calendars on there.
Just because you like whiskey, and this is technically not an official Brewthers-In-Law page.
True.
Even though Wise Old Owls Brew is a friend of the podcast.
It is.
A member of the podcast.
And of course, you can reach out to us at YouTube, at Apple Podcasts, at Google Podcasts, and anywhere else you listen to your podcasts. You can rate us there. Let us know any comments, what you feel about the episodes or the podcast itself. And if you want to talk about the first sip, what is your favorite story of just mythological stuff in general? It can be comic book, it can be myths, it can be the Bible, any story that teaches you a lesson.
If you have an urban legend or a Myth-Brewsters style myth that teaches a lesson, I'd love to hear it because I tried for a week to think about a good example, couldn't find one.
Or if you have a beer myth that you want us to test, we'll test it.
Oh, that'd be great.
Yeah, if you got a beer myth you want us to test, we will
It's hard to
definitely
think of
test
these
it.
ideas, man.
It is.
We'd love some help.
But you know what? Until we hear from...